Hi everyone, and welcome back to Amazon Q4 Mastery. You heard it right, and we're here for you with a bonus session, and this session is on sourcing. We don't have one or two, but we have three very special speakers for you right here. So let's get started after this quick intro. So hi everyone, welcome back to Amazon Q4 Mastery, and I'm going to introduce you to all the speakers now. So we have Margaret here. Hi Margaret.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. So Margaret helps all types of Amazon sellers enhance their Amazon journey. So she helps new sellers launch their first product, and she helps professional sellers optimize their listings, and then you have videos and audio. So she does all of it. And then we have Mekhla. Hi, Mekhla.
Hi, Ria.
Mekhla is one of my favorite people when it comes to sourcing. She's been doing it almost as long as I've been alive on this planet, which is 21 years. So hi, Mekhla. She's the queen of sourcing, and she's been working in the industry for almost 20 years. She knows ins and outs of sourcing. She's been working with Asia for a really long time as well. So welcome to Amazon Q4 Mastery, Mekhla.
Thank you.
And then we have Ram Menon. Hi, Ram. Ram is our in-house specialist. He's the director of sales at SellerApp, and he helps emerging brands take right steps in their Amazon journeys. So hello, Ram.
Hey, Ria.
Yeah, so this session is on sourcing, as I mentioned before. It's going to be quite long, so I suggest all of you to pause the session whenever you feel like it's getting too overwhelming for you and come back. That's why we have added timestamps, so it's easier for you to go through the video more quickly and easier at your own convenience. So before starting the session, I have a question for you, Ram. So I understand that there's self-manufacturing and there's sourcing of your products. So what do you suggest is more beneficial, and when is it beneficial for sellers to self-manufacture or source their products?
Thank you for the question, Ria. It kind of really depends on which stage of your Amazon business you are in, right? So if you're typically a newbie into the Amazon scale of business, then you prefer the whole outsourcing model. But let's say if you're in the growth stage or a kind of expert, been selling probably for 7-10 years, then you probably end up having your own manufacturing, or you contract someone to kind of help you with the scale of business, right? So there is a couple of advantages and obviously disadvantages to it. Obviously one of the biggest things is you save on cost and you maximize your profits. So with the contract manufacturing, you end up saving a lot of costs because the team helps manage every aspect of the whole business. One of the other important aspects is the technical insight which the contract manufacturer ends up giving you, right? Because without the lack of knowledge in terms of in-house resource, the contract manufacturer team helps you in the whole scale of business. The third part of it is the scalability of the business. As a small business or a startup, it is difficult for you to scale with the limited resources at hand. So a contract manufacturer has significant more resources. They're able to scale your business with the more product. And if you're experiencing the peak of demand, the contract manufacturer helps complete the whole scale of business, right? The whole life cycle of your entire business itself.
Yep. Yeah, and that's really good advice, because when you're a newbie, I understand that you don't have that much capital to start your own manufacturing unit. So I've seen a lot of sellers start with sourcing and then they move to self-manufacturing. All right. So thank you for answering that question, Ram. And now we're moving to the presentation sector of the talk. So Mekhla, let's get started with the presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get started, Ria. So let me share my screen. Margaret and I have prepared some slides for everybody here. And what we're going to do is basically walk everyone through the process of sourcing from India. And I have to tell everyone that Margaret is really an expert sourcing from India. She's an Amazon seller herself. She sells on Amazon US and also Australia. And she has been sourcing from India for a few years now. She even visited her factory in Moradabad last year and spent a week over there. So yeah, Margaret is like really experienced when it comes to sourcing from India. All right, so the topics for today, what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the various steps that are involved in the entire sourcing process, specifically from India. So I'm going to be talking about how you can find suppliers, vet suppliers, and also how you can do the sampling. And then Margaret is going to be talking about packaging, negotiating, placing orders with your supplier, and of course, shipping and logistics, which is a very important part of the process. So let's get into the first section. How exactly do you find suppliers when you want to source products from India? Now, this is of course assuming that you already have a product in mind that you want to sell on Amazon and you want to private label this product. So in China, when you want to look for a supplier in China, you just go to Alibaba. That's kind of the default marketplace or website that people go to. In India, it's slightly different. So first of all, what you can do is just try to Google suppliers, because while Google and such websites are blocked in China, a lot of the websites, suppliers' websites, are not indexed. But that's not the case in India. So most of the websites would be indexed. And so you can actually find suppliers just by Googling. The other thing you can do is go to these supplier directories, specifically Alibaba and Global Sources, and look for suppliers. Now, while these two directories mostly have manufacturers from China, they also have Indian suppliers. In fact, Alibaba and Global Sources both have offices in India, and they actively recruit suppliers to advertise on their marketplace. In fact, I started working with Global Sources 20 years ago in their India, for their India office. So they've been in India for a really long time. The good thing about Alibaba and Global Sources is that most of the suppliers on these websites are export focused. And when you're sourcing for the US or UK, you want to make sure that the supplier has experience in the export market, or they are an exporter. Otherwise, they might not be aware of the quality standards, requirements of the market, of overseas markets. So Alibaba Global Sources, they have exporters. And the way to look for Indian suppliers on these websites is to first of all do a search for your product, and then use the country location filter to see suppliers from India and also other countries as well. Now, there's another website that you could use, IndiaMart. IndiaMart is a local version or is a local supplier directory, but IndiaMart is very domestic focused. There are a lot of there are manufacturers on IndiaMart, but there are also a lot of wholesalers and importers that sell in the domestic market on IndiaMart. So you'll find that maybe there are some products from China that are being distributed in the local market. So they're not, all suppliers on IndiaMart are not exporters. You can find manufacturers, but you have to do a bit more due diligence, and you have to, dig a little deeper to find the right factory. There are also export promotion councils. These are government organizations, and basically what they do is they promote exports in their specific categories. So there are, for example, there's a cotton export promotion council, silk, handicrafts, carpet, all of these different sectors. So you can just do a search for your product category and try to look for the export promotion council. Many times they have their supplier list online on their website, or you can also send them an email and ask them to give their supplier directory. The good thing about all of the suppliers that are listed with export promotion councils is that they have export experience. So again, when you're sourcing from India, you want to make sure that the supplier has export experience. You can also source via sourcing agents. And these are basically, these can be like large companies with hundreds of employees that have offices in different locations, or these can also be smaller companies or even independent agents that do sourcing. There are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind when you're looking for sourcing agents. So first of all, you want to make sure that the sourcing agent is experienced in the product category that you are looking for. And bigger companies will usually have different departments or maybe different people who specialize in specific categories, but smaller companies, they typically specialize in some categories. And when an agent specializes in a category, they have better connections with factories, they have better relationships with factories, and they know most of the good factories in that specific category. So that's something to ask them. The other thing you want to find out is where they are located and how far away are they from the location of the factory, because you want the agent to be able to travel to the factory and do inspections, at least once or twice during the production process. And if the agent is very far away, then it will be difficult for them to travel to the factory. You can also look for exhibitors at the Delhi Fair. So Delhi Fair is one of the biggest export-focused fairs that's held in Delhi twice a year, every April and October. Of course, it wasn't held this year because of COVID, but they did do a virtual fair as well. But all of the exhibitors at this fair are exporters. So what you can do is just Google Delhi Fair exhibitors and you'll be able to find a list of exhibitors from previous shows. And I have to also say that exhibitors at any fair are more legitimate and more trustworthy than suppliers you find online, because these companies are, they have spent the time and effort and money to come and exhibit at the trade fair, so they are more likely to be, serious suppliers than others that you just find online. Also, I should add over here that Margaret and I host a monthly sourcing show called Virtual India Sourcing Show, where we interview suppliers from India in live webinars, and they talk about their stories, their history, and also show their products, and they also answer audience questions. So those are some ways to find suppliers. Yeah.
No, I'm just putting it out there that the show is really fun to watch, the Virtual India sourcing. So I will link it down below. So I suggest everyone to go watch it. It's live as well, and people can leave all the comments, and you can ask all your queries to them, and they will answer it right away. And I have a question for you, Mekhla, right here, because I have heard this since the beginning of time that sourcing comes with zero liability and you should always consider sourcing. But I know for a fact that it's not true, because sourcing does not come with zero liability. So if you can just talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Ria, you're absolutely right. Sourcing does come with liability. In fact, the brand or the Amazon seller who's getting the product manufactured, they are liable for their product and responsible for the product they are putting out, because, you're designing the product. It's being sold under your company name with your brand. So the manufacturer is just making the product based on your specifications and requirements, and it's up to you to manage quality of the product. So yeah, you're definitely liable as an Amazon seller.
Yep. And what is an ideal checklist for a seller when they're trying to look for suppliers, and what should the checklist include?
So a couple of things that you want to look for. First of all, you want to make sure they have export experience, specifically in the market that you want to export to. And you also want to make sure that they specialize in the product that you're looking for. So, and even within the broad product category, you want to make sure that they have experience in your specific product. For example, if a supplier makes wooden products, right? And let's say you want to source a very fancy kind of wood product, but the supplier that you're looking at, they do wood products, but maybe they do very simple, chopping boards or something, and they don't have experience, so they don't have the machinery to do fancy products. So you want to make sure and check with them if they can actually, make the product, and they are specialists in the product that you're looking to source. You also want to make sure that they are the right size for you, because if you're a small company and you're only sourcing like hundreds or thousands of pieces, you don't want to go to a really big company that has very high minimum order quantities, because they will not really, give you any priority.
Yep. And the Delhi fair that you were talking about, I remember that it being virtual this year, which was really sad, because I do love attending fairs and they're so colorful and so much fun. So hopefully, do you think next year is going to be virtual as well, or will it be in-house?
It's anybody's guess, Ria. We're living in very uncertain times. Let's hope that it will continue next year, but we'll see.
All right. So let's get back to your presentation. Thank you for answering the questions.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Okay, so let's talk about vetting suppliers. Now, once you found a company, sometimes you also need to make sure that they are indeed legitimate companies, because unfortunately, there are some scammers out there that you have to be aware of. So these are a couple of things that you can do. You can check the company's Udyog Aadhaar number, which is basically a company registration number. You can also check their GST number, which is the goods and services tax number, to make sure that they are a legal entity. And then again, CIN LLP number. This is also a company registration number. You can also just Google their name and check if all of the information that they have provided on various websites is consistent. So usually exporters, what they would do is they would advertise on different websites like Global Sources, Alibaba, maybe some other supplier directories. So you want to just check and make sure that the information is all consistent over there, and then just Google their name plus scam. If they have scammed somebody in the past, it's possible that it has been posted on the internet as well. So that's one thing to check. The other thing that you want to check is if they have export experience. So you can actually ask for their import-export code. which is a code that every exporter needs to get in India if they are going to export their products. You can also ask if they have been certified by a big importer like Walmart or one of the big companies. If they have supplied products to those companies, then of course big buyers, they have a lot of guidelines and they have rigid criteria for selecting suppliers. So if a company has been selected by a big buyer, that they have experience. And then check if they are on Alibaba or Global Sources, because these are export-focused websites. Are they an exhibitor at Delhi Fair? Again, Delhi Fair is for exporters. Have they exhibited at international sourcing fairs? That again is an indication that they are a serious and export-focused supplier. You can also ask if they have export house star rating. And this is basically a rating that the government of India gives to exporters. And the rating is from a 1-star to a 5-star based on the amount or the value of exports that a company is doing. So if a company has export star rating, export house star rating, then that means that they are an exporter. Also, just check if they are a member of an export promotion council, and that will also tell you that they are an exporter. The third thing that you want to find out is if they are really a manufacturer, because it does happen sometimes that people will tell you they are a manufacturer, but maybe they're not. They're just posing to be manufacturers, or they are maybe just a trading company or an individual that's sourcing from a manufacturer. So the first thing that you do is just ask them. And usually factories will be very upfront about their production facilities, their capabilities, and they'll also have pictures and videos on their website. Also, you'll notice that manufacturers will have a smaller range of products that are usually very similar, or they are made from similar materials or made via a similar process. Whereas agents or trading companies will offer a wide range of products. And the reason for this is, when you manufacture a product, there's a lot of investment and all that's required, and you would typically, try to specialize in one product before you diversify into manufacturing other products. So for example, if a company makes wooden products and also apparel, or if they are offering wooden and apparel products on their website, they're likely a trading company and maybe not a manufacturer. Also, you can just do a video call and ask them to show the factory and, just do a tour of the factory. You can also get a factory audit done. So there are companies, third-party QC quality control companies like Kima or VTrust that can actually do a factory audit for you. And it costs a couple of $100 and it's really worth it, especially if you are going to be sourcing in high volumes. You can also ask your sourcing agent to visit the factory because they're on the ground, and you can ask them to take pictures or do a live video from the factory as well. Okay, I'm going to talk about sampling real quick, and then I'm going to hand it over to Margaret. So sampling is really important, and basically you are asking the supplier to produce a product that you want, so that you can check the quality of the product, and you can make sure that you're confident that you really want to place an order with this company. So there are a couple of different things that you can do. First of all, you can ask the factory to give you any standard samples that they may have made for previous buyers, right? So that will give you an idea of the quality of the product that the supplier can do. Or you can also get custom samples made from the supplier. So if you have your own design, you can provide the design to them and they will make samples based on your design. But it's very important that you clearly communicate all of the specifications if it's your own design, including what materials you want, the functions, features, the dimension, size, appearance, colors. Everything needs to be communicated very clearly. And in most cases, when you're developing a sample, you might not get it right the first time, but don't be disheartened. Sampling takes time, and it's okay to go back and forth a couple of times with the supplier and tell them to make certain improvements, and maybe they misunderstood the first time, and you can always ask them to make enhancements in the sample. So just because the first sample doesn't come out right, don't think that the supplier will not be able to produce the product. Also, when you're doing a sample, usually what happens is that the supplier provides the sample for free, usually, and the buyer pays for shipping. But if you want a very customized kind of sample, then I would suggest to pay for the sample. And usually what happens is when you place an order with that supplier, they will actually reimburse the cost of the sample to you, and they will deduct it from the invoice that they give you for the order. So there's also a concept known as golden sample. And golden sample is basically a sample of the product that is approved by the buyer. And this is the sample that the factory has as reference when they manufacture the product. And usually there are 2 or 3 golden samples that are produced. One is with the buyer, one is with the supplier. And if there's a sourcing agent, then a sourcing agent also has one. And sometimes the buyer needs to sign on the golden sample to, say that, okay, this is the sample that I have approved. There's also something known as the pre-production sample, where you actually see one piece of the product, just right before it's going into production. So just to make sure that, everything is okay. So yeah, those are the couple of things for sampling. And now let's move on to packaging. And over to you, Margaret.
Before we move on to Margaret, I have a small question for Ram. So Ram, we spoke about owning the product, right? So how do you deal with the patent issue? Because I've seen that happening a lot, because when you produce something and then it gets patented in other countries. So how do you avoid that? And does manufacturer have anything to do with it?
A preventative approach needs to be taken instead of spending a lot of time and effort in dealing with the aftermath of the complications, right? So as your seller on Amazon, you do not want to launch products that are going to pose any risk in terms of infringement in the first place, right? So I think the first step is something you can possibly do is something called a design search, where the first step as a seller, you should be able to kind of understand if this product is already not being sold on Amazon and can understand the whole process, right? So one of the things you could do is probably an analysis involving your product, figuring out what the product is, what the image is, what the design could be, what are the drawings to establish that you're not in risk of actually infringing with other existing patents, right? So the outcome of it is probably more in terms of a subjective thing. But furthermore, it is kind of really important at the very beginning itself, because once you launch your product and you start making sales, and the ultimate risk comes when Amazon will potentially suppress your listing and it's an infringement case, right? So then it's a kind of back and forth tussle with Amazon, kind of ongoing for months and months. So it is really critical in the very start itself, but I think it's always very important to kind of make that steps, or take the right steps in the very beginning itself.
Yeah, very important. All right. Thank you so much, Ram. And over to you, Margaret. Let's talk about packaging now.
Thanks, Rhea. Yeah, look, with the packaging, I think you can't wait too long. Once you've decided that that is your product and you've either placed the order or you're about to place an order, you need to start thinking about how you're going to package that particular item. Now, quite often your factory can produce like a standard box that might just flip open at each end and your product would slide in, which is quite good to use. In a lot of cases, that's all the product requires. It doesn't need some big, glamorous, expensive packing box. But if you want to go off and do something that is quite unique or has a display box in it and all sorts of Eva foam and things inside, you might find that your manufacturer can't do that because they just have standard packaging done. So you can then source a professional box manufacturer that can do really beautiful, all different designs of packaging. So that way then you can stand out from the crowd, but you also want to make sure that you don't, I suppose, overbox your product and, put a $5 product in this $5 box, because it's really not cost effective. So you've got to sort of stand back and think what your product's going to be sold for. Is it really a big expensive gift, or is it just something that needs a standard box? Now with the packaging, you can have like every sort of gift box, one that opens up and it's all on display. You can have just a pretty box that's, got some design on the outside. You can use plastic bag. If you've got something that doesn't warrant any sort of packaging at all, you can put it in a fairly thick poly bag. You could wrap it in bubble wrap. Some people now are getting very eco-friendly, and especially with their products being maybe made of eco material, they might put it in a calico bag or some eco-friendly bag. So it's very important to start this at the same process as you're manufacturing your product, because you really don't want to get, the week before and you've got no boxes made, because it will take some time, especially with your product. You've got to work out how much it's going to it has to fit into that box. So it's a fairly important step to get right. Now, with the boxing, there is Amazon have standard sizes, which makes it a little bit more economical when it comes to their fees. So if you have a box that's 18 inches by 14 by 8, and that's on any side. So you can only have one side that's 18 inches long, one that's 14 and one that's 8 or less. And that becomes like what we call standard charges, which are a lot more economical. But so when you're getting your manufacturer to work out how you can place these products in, it's important to sort of make him shrink it down as much as he can, because that half an inch on a box could save you $3 or $4 in your actual fee on every single product. So you want to have, we actually design our product. If it's, we'll make it 17.5 inches, not 18.1 inches or something, because those things can just eat into your profit so much. So it's very important that you take all these things into consideration with the design of your product as well as the design of your package, because it's all dollars at the end. Now with Amazon, they're a little bit different to just the shops. All your products have to pass a drop test. Now that means that the package can be thrown or dropped from a 3-foot and not break, or the carton not fall apart, or the bag, whatever you've got it in. So you've got to make sure, we tend to use like core flute or one of the stronger 3-layer packaging boxes, not just a flimsy box that will easily fall apart. And I'll explain why that is. And if you're new to Amazon and packaging, what you need to do, you actually have a packaging box that your product goes in, or if it's a poly bag. Then when you're shipping them, they will get packed into shipping cartons. You might get 8, 10, 12, depending on the size of your product, into each carton. So that is fairly well protected, from your manufacturer to the port, on the ship and off at the other end. Then it will go into Amazon, and they actually take your products out of those sort of shipping cartons and put them on their shelves. But then they might decide that they've got some in California and they want to send them to New York, so they'll get a couple of them and put them in another box or pack them in with other things, and it'll go over across the country. So it gets handled a lot. Then when it gets ordered, the customer gets it in an Amazon box, so your box then gets put into an Amazon box. So as you can imagine, it's pretty well handled. So it's very important to think about that packaging. Will it sustain all that handling? And like, you don't want to put it in a white calico bag. If you do that, you really need to put it in some sort of clear bag to protect it, or it would be just so dirty and grubby. So even white boxes, sometimes you've sort of we've had them come back and you sort of see that they're not perfect anymore, because they've been sort of, tossed around quite a bit. So I think that's very important to make sure that what you're packing in is going to, travel the time. The people don't want to get it in some ripped up package when they open their product that they've purchased. With the branding of your box, there's 2 ways you can go about it. You could have either a nice, just your logo put onto a coloured box or a white box, or printed onto just a piece of paper and stuck onto your plastic bag, something like that. I do that particularly because I find it's more economical, because we use that same packaging on every product. So we don't have to pay to get a graphic designer to redesign every package. We use the same logo on the front of every package. And the other way, you can have like an image of the product. So if you're selling, a wooden bowl, you could have a pretty picture of it with some, fruit or something in the bowl on the outside of the box. But once then, if you move to another product, it means you've got to pay someone to redesign, take some more photography. And when you think about it, that box is never seen until it actually gets to the client. So it's not like it's on a shelf in a retail store that people are going to see that image. So I just find it saves us a lot of money by just using the standard packaging. Now, on the back of, usually we put it on the back, most people do, of your product, you must have a barcode. Now, there's a GS1 barcode, which is like a world standard barcode that everyone uses in all the retail stores as well, or just an Amazon FNSKU. Now, that must be clear and not sort of wrinkled up underneath some plastic or something. because Amazon scan it, and if they can't scan it, they'll end up relabeling it, and it'll cost you money, and it can be a nightmare. And you also must have the country of origin. So if it's made in India, you would put, usually underneath the barcode or beside it, made in India, or if it's made in China, wherever the majority of that product is from, it needs to be on that packaging. So that's, probably very important to have that right, because if it's not done right, and you can check it, you can always check when you can get your barcode checked by the factory. With most phones, you can have a QR code on that can check those barcodes are right and readable. So now if we move on to, did you want to say something, Rhea?
Yeah, so I just want to mention that again, that packaging is something that I've seen a lot of sellers suffer with because they don't consider their packaging before. And then there are these additional costs to it, or sometimes I think we all know that actually we don't know what goes on in the warehouses. So we don't know how they handle your products. And the only thing I can compare it to is the airport warehousing where they take your luggage, because sometimes I've gotten my luggage and a wheel is missing. So I can only imagine what goes on in the warehouses there. And I want to focus on the point where you say standard size, because they're shipping pallets, right? So what happens is, because of this shipping pallets, if your box is bigger or smaller, they will charge you either more if your box is bigger, because if it doesn't fit on a shipping pallet. So if you can talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that becomes oversized, which is a completely different, I suppose, like you've got your standard size products, which most sellers, tend to stick to because of the cost. Like, just to give you an example, if say you're using a shoebox into Amazon, the price of that, the Amazon fee, referral fee, is around about $5 to $7, depending on the weight of, of what's in it as well. It's all quite a complicated way they calculate it. But if you've got something that's, say, 30 inches by 30 inches, they call that oversized. Now that can go can triple that price very quickly if you get to that size. But even if you had something that's, say, 20 by 15 by 9, that could probably go from $5 to $7 up to about $11 or $12. It doesn't have to be much. And even I have one product that I couldn't change the size of, which is only 19.5 inches, but it's only 1.5 inches high and about 6 inches wide. But that actually costs me nearly $11 compared to a shoebox that costs me $7. So it's just, and the storage is done differently in Amazon. They go to special warehouses. Oversized packaging always goes to different warehouses to standard packaging. So if you're doing a shipment and you've got some oversized and some standard, you end up having to split your shipment. So they're just things to be, I suppose, a little bit wary of. And look, if you're starting out, it's probably ideal to start off with the standard size product if you can, until you sort of learn the ropes and then venture into the more expensive sort of, I suppose, products, because it's just the cost factor. You have to have a lot more margin in your product, so you really need to understand how the costings work.
Yeah, that's super important again. So let's go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, look, when you start negotiating and placing your orders, look, we try and advise not to do too small of an order. A lot of people want to test the market and don't want to sort of, commit to, very many, and do a small order of under 200. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I don't particularly like that. Is the cost of, well, you can't negotiate to start with. You can't really say, I want your best price, but I only want 200 of these, because you're almost, I suppose, a nuisance to most factories, because, for them to set up all their people and go through the process to do a small order. So I suggest that you try and do a larger order, or maybe 200 of 3 different colours or something like that, so that when you're doing an order, you've got a substantial order, because then you've got a little bit more negotiation room when it comes to your price. Because to just ship 200, usually your factory will include in the price the cost of shipping it to the port. So if it's only 200, they usually charge you an additional fee to do that, because there's no profit margin in their 200 items. They're not going to be making enough to cover the transport. So that's one reason. And then I think The other reason is if you only buy 200 products and it takes off on Amazon and you've got to wait, 90 days or something for your next shipment to go through, you're going to run out of stock. So I think you've got to take the risk, and I know people don't want to lose money, but you're going into business, and our overheads to start a business with Amazon is a lot less than, filling out a retail store. I mean, if you were opening up a retail store, you couldn't just get 100 products and stick them on the shelf and open the door. It's going to look pretty empty. So I think you really need to be prepared to commit a little bit more when you start your Amazon business and have enough products there to get you through 3 or 4 months of selling. And, if you're selling well, you might be able to, after the first month, place another order and then go on to larger volume. And at that point, that's when you can start to negotiate. So if you know that you're going to be ordering 1,000 of these every 3 months, well, you can go back to your supplier and say, okay, now I can guarantee you an order every 3 months and I'm going to need 1,000. What's your price? What price can we negotiate? You can actually... And then, you've got a tool to bargain with. But I also think be careful and don't try and just get your supplier to do it really, really cheap, because in the end, they're going to start cutting corners because they've got to make a living out of this as well as we do. So I think there's a happy medium that you've got to sort of not go and just try and get something and just keep saying, I want it cheaper, because I think you get what you pay for in the end. It's like everything. If you get a tradesman to your home and then you only want to pay him half the rate, well, you're not going to get the full job. So I think people have got to be a little bit more considerate of the suppliers and the amount of work. I've been to their factories and I see how much work's involved, and now I'm very happy to pay the prices for our goods because I know how hard they work, and particularly in India, because they're all handmade products. So there's a lot of skill and a lot of time in every little component that they do. So I think, being fair to everyone gets you a better product in the end. Now, with your purchase orders, once you're doing that, you've always got to make sure that it's really clear and concise. And like Megla was saying, like your golden sample, if you've got a golden sample, you can include in it that it must be identical to the golden sample, or, what style you want or what colour you want. Don't assume that they know or what you're thinking. Put down every point you can think of, even if you think it's overkill. It's better to have every single point you want, or something that's a special change you've made, maybe that you don't want them to forget, or you want an insert with the package. Whatever you want, put everything on that purchase order so there's no confusion when it's finished and you look at it and you go, oh, but you didn't do that. If you haven't spelled it out, you've got no comeback really. And I think with quality control, you really need to discuss that at the time you place the order, and just let your firm know or your supplier know that you want to have a quality control company come in and check the product. Now, you might decide to do it partway through. You might just do it at the final stage. I don't like actually getting it done once it's all boxed up, because I know how much work's involved in ours all being packed and all the boxes all sealed nicely, and then having a quality control person come in and rip all the box open again. To me, that's a bit counterintuitive, because you're just wasting time and, wrecking the box before it's sort of even left, part one. So I think it's a good idea to work with your supplier and say, look, I want it done. So when everything's ready to be boxed and the boxes are there, can you get the QA, gentleman in and work together? So it's a lot easier that way than, having it sort of all ripped apart once it's put together, I think. And look, most factories are happy to do this, but if you don't want to go to that expense, or it's just a product that can't have a lot of things go wrong, you can actually just say to your supplier, can we jump on a video call? Can you get, the product? Can you get the box? Can you show it all to me? And you can work through it, in 10 minutes on a call, and you can see, ask him to turn it over, look at this, look at anything that you think. So there's two ways of doing it, and it depends, number one, if you're comfortable with your factory and how complex your product is. So that's, really a decision that you've got to make. If sometimes for your first maybe sort of transaction, maybe you'd get it checked. And then if you're happy with the first one, maybe not do it so often. It's just, and you can also see if you start getting complaints from customers if something's wrong, well, obviously you really need to get a QC done on those particular items.
Yep, very important. And I have a question for you, Mekla, right now. So we have a negotiation checklist with us, and I want to understand how do cross-borders buyer validate their pricing or cost?
I think one of the things that they could do is reach out to multiple suppliers on, let's say, a website like Alibaba, Global Sources, or even at a trade show. Just ask multiple suppliers the price of that specific product, and that'll give you a benchmark of what the average product is. What the average price of the product is, and if you get a price that is too low, or if it's too high, then that supplier is maybe not giving you the right price. But yeah, if you just go ask 10 people, you'll get an average price.
Yep. And to you, Margaret, I want to understand with the quality checks happening before shipping and before your order placement, do you go for part load or do you go for full load? So what's ideal for you?
Look, we don't get a lot of hours checked because we have a really great relationship with our supplier, and we don't have issues very often with any of our products. So we don't, but I do know people who have had issues who on their second one, like maybe their first shipment, they did partial and then still got complaints of quality issues when it's got out to the customers, that they've actually had every single piece checked. So I think it's just depends on the product, what it consists of, and if you've had any issues with it. But look, we've been very lucky, and I find, look, we've dealt with China and with India, and we did have a lot more issues when we were getting products out of China than we do have out of India. I'm finding that our products have been really good. We don't get a lot of issues. But everything's different. I mean, if you've got something that's really complex, you probably would want everyone checked, or some particular, you might only want a certain thing on the product checked, not the whole, product. Can you just look at this particular thing? Is it, glued in properly or something like that that could be an issue? So that's something that every product is different.
Yeah. All right. That was really good advice. And I'm glad to know that India is doing so well and helping you with your business. So I'm happy.
Yeah, no, it was a dream. We're just so happy that we found India. So it's really good for us. Yeah, it's worked well. Now, look, with your shipping, if you've got a small order of just say 200, items of a product, it's going to be quite expensive to ship. If you have to do sea shipping, a small order like that costs nearly as much as a large order. An example would be, I know people who have shipped 200 items recently, and they're not huge, items, just say shoebox size, and that can cost up to $1,200. Whereas you can also ship, and I ship usually over 1,000, and I can ship 1,000 pieces for around $2,000. So the variance of those two is a lot. So when you're doing small orders, it becomes very expensive to do your shipping. So that's another reason why, to me, doing a very small order is not really smart, because you're throwing away a lot of your margin because you can't charge more because you've done such a small order. So I think, to me, the happy medium is to do more like 1,000. And the reason why it's so, I suppose, much more expensive to do 100, it's not the shipping component of a sea shipment is not that expensive. It might only be of that $1,200. It might only be $300 or $400. The rest of it are all like port charges and clearance charges and containering and all these different things. And so whether you've got 200 or 1,000, you've still got the same bits of paper and everything to go with it. So that's why very small shipments work out a lot more expensive. Now, air versus sea shipping. Air is great, like if you're selling earrings or something really small that can fit into, a few cartons, that's great. And if it's very lightweight, but if you've got anything that's like a shoebox size, you very seldom would air freight that in. The cost would just outweigh, you'd lose all your profit. And at the moment with COVID, air shipping has become very, very expensive. It's probably 3 times at least its normal cost. So an example of that might be, one product, we ran out of some product and I shipped just a small quantity through, and like about a shoebox size actually cost me $10 per product to put each item in. So it's not really cost effective to do as a normal thing for a larger product, and due to the cost of the COVID at the moment. So hopefully once the airlines get back in the air, the air shipping will come, down in cost a lot. So I think at the moment, and even sea shipping has gone up because it's with the COVID. I think there's so much demand for more shipping because most people are going on to sea shipping instead of air shipping because it's so expensive. So you've really got to weigh up your costs and get a quote early in the piece as well to work out, to make sure how much you're up for, because it can quickly add up. As you can see, like if you've only got 200 products and it's costing you $1,200, that's $6 extra you've got to add on or take out of your profit, whichever way you look at it. And then look, Amazon, sending your products into Amazon versus putting them into a 3PL. At the moment, there's some new changes with Amazon because of the a lot of stem back from COVID, where they've tried to limit the amount of stock that people can keep in Amazon. So most people now, and particularly new sellers, can only put 200 of any product in to start with. So you can't actually ship. If you've ordered 500 or 1,000 products, you must put them into a 3PL and what we call drip feed them into Amazon. But in a way, that's a big saving for people. If you Q4, which is October, November, December in Amazon, that is normally during the year we pay 75 cents per cubic foot to store our products there every month. In Q4, it's $2.40 a cubic foot, so it's nearly 4 times as much. So you don't really want to send in thousands of products and sit them there for 3 months and pay $2.40 a cubic foot, because a cubic foot doesn't take much to fill a cubic foot. Some of my products are half a cubic foot and they're still standard size boxes. So you can quickly add, and if it's in there for 3 months, I mean, you're up for another $3.60. So you've just got to be careful not to eat away at your profit margin all the time. So, and I think there is a cost if you use a 3PL though, because what happens is you put your products into your 3PL and you pay them storage, and usually they're about 50 or 60 cents a cubic foot. They usually just charge by pallet, but then they do what they call pick and pack. So obviously to receive all your cartons or your pallets, whatever you send in, there's a charge. Then when you want them to go into Amazon, there's another charge. So you'll have to pay them, $2 to pick it and pack it and organise the courier to pick them up. So that is an additional cost. And then you use usually the Amazon Courier Service US postal service to pick up the goods. And that they charge, once again, another cost. So it is additional cost, but I think most of the time it is outweighed by, instead of paying $2.40 a cubic foot, you still break, or come forward, and you've got some products in a 3PL if you want to do fulfilled by merchant. If Amazon for some reason are so busy that they can't send our goods out over Christmas, we can then do fulfilled by merchant from the 3PL. So I think at the moment, for most people, probably they don't have a choice. They will have to go into a 3PL. But, general rule during the year, maybe going into, if you've just got a smaller shipment going straight into Amazon, if they'll take it, is okay, because it's not as expensive. Now, the time frames for sea shipping. When we're shipping from India, we like to go into the west, not to the east coast, not the west coast. Normally from China, you would go into California or the west coast, but from India, it's a lot quicker. It only takes 20 to 25 days to go into Nhava Sheva. So either port of Mumbai or Nhava Sheva is in Mumbai. So, and then we go straight from there to New York. So that is quite quick for shipping time. If we actually went into the west coast with our goods, it would probably take about 40 days. So it's a lot longer time frame. So that's sort of something that we try and avoid and go always into New York. And in particular, you also, on top of that, you've got most of the, I suppose, manufacturers are either out of Delhi, Jaipur, Moradabad, all up around that part of India. So to get your goods from your factory to the port is usually about 4 days by road or rail. So you've got to allow that. So your shipping really takes about 30 days from your manufacturer to actually reach the port in sort of New York. Once it arrives there, you've got probably 3 to 5 days for your customs clearance, and then it's either got to be delivered into Amazon, whether you put some into Amazon from there and some to a 3PL or to your 3PL. So you're probably looking at a good 30 days, minimum from getting your goods being ready to manufacturer. So you've got to allow for that. Whereas if you do air shipping, it's probably about a week, and it will probably go out of Delhi in India, and it can go anywhere then. It doesn't really matter the air freight. There's no sort of particular, because the planes are going everywhere. But obviously there's quite a delay with doing the air shipping, so it can take a bit longer than normal, but normally it would take around a week to do air shipping.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, especially with our current situation. I understand that air, as you mentioned, is not really working in full force. So shipping might be the only way for some sellers to get their product sourced and shipped. So yeah, Margaret, I have a payment question for you right here. So how do Amazon sellers ensure that they don't lose money by paying suppliers that they don't know?
Normally the normal rule in most of the manufacturing going into Amazon is we would pay a deposit to them when we place the order of 30%. And at the time you get a bill of lading when your goods are finished from your manufacturer, and we pay on that bill of lading, which means that our goods are actually at the port ready to go on the ship. So then you're pretty well guaranteed that you've got the goods, because then they become yours. Once you've take possession of them at the port, they're mine. So that way then I think there's not a lot of risk with it. The biggest risk, I suppose, is when you're paying your deposit and waiting, if something went wrong in that, 3 months time frame, between, you can lose the deposit but not all your money. And I think it's pretty acceptable to only pay 30%. I know some manufacturers might ask for 50%, but normally if you go back and explain that, no, look, that's not the norm, unless it's, a really small order, that's when, again, they might just want, a little bit more deposit. But normally 30% is quite acceptable.
Yeah, I think that's very important to understand, because it's so easy to get scammed when you're a newbie, and then you lose so much money when you're sourcing. So yeah, that's really good advice. So I think we're coming to the sourcing timeline, which is so important. So I suggest everyone to listen carefully from now on.
Yes, look, with the sourcing timeline, people don't realise how long it takes to actually, get a product to market. Now, when you're sort of starting out, you've got a lot more involved. So your very first order, I would say, takes you around 6 months. So, just say you want to have something in there into Amazon for next April, which is the start of their summer, their busy time. You're doing something for the beach or something, so you definitely want it in there by April. So if you don't start looking for that in Q4, in November, like people think, it's Q4 and they're busy with Q4, but you've really got to plan well ahead. So you need to start, and if you're new now and you think, I've missed the boat, I'll do it next year, you don't do it next year, you start working on it now. Because if you start looking for a product, or, if you've got your product in mind and you start, finding suppliers and you're vetting supplier, you need to do that in November. And start getting a sample. Now, a sample's going to probably take you 3 or 4 weeks. By the time you muck around, go back and forwards, you mightn't like what you get. The manufacturer's not sitting there just waiting to make your one sample. You've just got to realise that they're hugely busy. They've got so many orders, so you've got to fit into it. So then in sort of December, you'll get your final sample and look at your packaging and do some work on your packaging. So your product would go into production in December and January, and probably, depending what your product is, out of India, because it's all handmade, it takes probably, I'd say most of the products are 60 to 90 days. You might find some that get done in 30 days, depending how complex it is. But as a general rule, I would allow 60 to 90 days to get my products made. Then you want to do an inspection and get them packaged up. And then, so they really need to leave the factory by the 15th of Feb. So if you start in November, December, Jan, Feb, so you've really got sort of 4 months there, and it's going to take you, 4 to 5 weeks, even 6 weeks to get it into Amazon. So you're just going to get there on April Fool's Day. So, that's ready for the start. So, and I think this also applies for people who are thinking they want to get into Q4 next year. They really need to work back. It's the same scenario. If you want to be in there in October, you've got to use this scenario and work backwards. So whenever you want to have your product live on Amazon, you really need to look at a plan like this and think back. And I tend to, and even with repeat products, you can probably take a month out because you're not doing the sampling and all that. But you've still got to remember that you've got to get in a queue of people. You're not, you can't just give them all today and they're going to drop everything and start your order. I mean, they've probably got a lot of production on the run. So you've got to we try and let them know. And I might say to my supplier, look, I'm going to do an order now and then I'll do another one in 2 months. And so he knows to leave a gap for my production. So I think it's a bit of communication with your manufacturer. And people say, they're going to take too long. But if you communicate well, I think the suppliers will work with you as well. And the more you use them, they treat you a lot better because they know you and they respect you and you have a great relationship with them. And I think building a relationship with your supplier is very, very important. We're friends with our supplier now. I mean, we talk about his family and everything else. And I think that's being personal and having that good relationship. You're going to get a lot better product and you're going to get looked after a lot better.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Big timeline.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good advice. Understanding that people who work for you, your suppliers are people as well. They're people with families. It doesn't the more you push them, the more you annoy them, your product is going to come out a little bit weird. So thank you so much, Margaret, for such helpful tips. I think Ram has a question for both of you, Margaret and Mekla. So let's get to the question, Ram.
Just a quick question, just to understand. So obviously, Margaret, you've been selling in Amazon itself. Is there a trial and test method, when you check out multiple suppliers or multiple manufacturers before finally deciding the product? And probably for Meghala, I mean, in terms of kind of dealing with manufacturers directly, I mean, have you had a bad experience in the past kind of saying, this is not a good one, and then right at the end moment kind of making the last minute decision to kind of change them and getting on to the new supplier part of it?
Look, with us, I mean, we actually met our supplier and we haven't even looked at another supplier because we just work with them. If I want to do a new product, I go, right, can we do this? And we work through what I want. So I'm very, very happy. And I think if you find a good supplier, they're quite happy to make, new products. You can you don't have to have exactly what they have when they display things. If they can work in wood and you can think of something different, you can work together and get that supplier to do it. I don't bother to get 3 or 4, quotes and 3 different suppliers. To me, I just think that's a little bit of a waste of everyone's time. If I'm happy with my supplier and I'm happy, I know what my margin is, I know what my costs are, I know what I can potentially sell the product for, I'm quite happy to pay a little bit more and get a decent product that I know I'm not going to have issues with, I'm not going to have returns with. So I think, to me, it's building up trust and building up that relationship. It doesn't really, to me, to save $1 on a product. And, I know people who worry about, I've saved $1 on my product, but then they'll spend, $60 a day or $100 a day on their PPC campaign or the giveaway or something. And you think, well, hang on. And to me, the most important thing is having a quality product. If you haven't got a quality product, it's not going to sell very well anyway, because you're just going to get, complaints and returns. So I think you've got to pay a fair price for what you get. And, you can always change a supplier down the track, but if you're happy, to me, why reinvent the wheel? That's my sort of stance.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to answer your question, Ram, yes, there have been instances where, maybe the supplier has not understood, the requirements of the product. And when they shipped the product, it was not as expected. And one of the main reasons for quality issues in product is actually miscommunication. So usually what happens is the buyer has not communicated their specific requirements, or they have not specified what materials or what size they want. and the supplier has just assumed that they want a certain thing, and of course the supplier will just use whatever is cheapest for them or most cost effective for them. So I think that's super important to just make sure you're not leaving any and not leaving the supplier to guess or assume what you want. Yeah, and there are, of course, scammers out there that you have to be aware of. And there have been cases where, maybe a buyer has gone to IndiaMart, they paid a supplier for a sample and then never heard back from them at all. So yeah, you have to be cautious of those things as well.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why, sorry. Yeah, we like to use the, like suppliers from the Delhi Fair or, people that we know are export quality. And I don't think you're going to get those issues. I think if you just go wandering off and find people, you don't know what you're getting. It's like buying, sort of anything else off the internet. If you just go and do that, I think if you check them out, you don't have those issues. It's just when people go off and think they found someone and they might be cheap, and that's what you get.
Yep, that was very well put, because sourcing is something that our sellers have come to us. They're like, we want to try sourcing, but we're scared. And I'm like, no, watch this video and watch how Meghla and Margaret has made it so easy for you. And this was a wonderful session to all of you there. Thank you for making the session so informative. And to all the viewers out there, thank you for listening to this session and making Amazon Q4 Mastery such a huge success. It wouldn't have been possible without you all. So thank you, and do not forget to like this video. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more seller content. So now that Amazon Q4 Mastery is ending, we are going back to our weekly videos. We post weekly content for you all there, and they are filled with a lot of information and a lot of new updates that Amazon throws at you. So do watch our videos to be in sync with Amazon policies. So thank you, Meghla and Margaret again, and I will see you all soon. Yeah, bye-bye.